Vision. I'm Melanie. Thanks so much for clicking. To my returning subscribers, thank you for your continuous love and support. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Please feel at home. Have you had an opportunity to hit that subscribe button yet? If not, take a second, hit subscribe, and please don't forget to like and share. I love YouTube. As I've mentioned before, we can learn so much, but it's a great resource for me to come across different videos of broadcasters doing interviews. I use them in my classes of what to do and what not to do, and definitely like, oh my goodness, don't ever do this. There's so many of them out there. And I have to pause and think to myself, how did these actually get out in the mass media? Really, truly, because some of them are really, really bad. Others just show that there are some people when you interview, they're really tough. They know how to handle you, and they're going to tell you exactly what it is they need to do and get you out of there as soon as possible. I came across an interview where the Foreign Affairs Minister of Rwanda was being interviewed. And this journalist came in, set the stage nicely, giving credit to Rwanda and what they had accomplished since the genocide.
Louise Mushikiwabo, thank you for joining me on Upfront.
Pleasure.
Rwanda has made huge economic and democratic advances, huge progress since that awful, horrific genocide there 22 years ago.
But then, when he started to ask his leading questions, he started to see what the Rwandan minister was really made of. How handled him so well. It was incredible. He thought he was going to be smart, calling her on human rights questions. How could it be that there are so many people in Rwanda being gone, and how they can stand for this? But honestly, what I found interesting is the way that the minister handled herself. She could, and that is the worst possible thing for any interview. She's acknowledging what he's saying, but not agreeing. So he was getting frustrated. But I loved it because she didn't say yes or no. She didn't agree or disagree, especially when he was asking questions about the allegations of a human rights conviction.
And yet, nevertheless, today, a plethora of international human rights groups line up to issue report after report criticizing the human rights situation in your country. Human Rights Watch says your government, quote, does not tolerate dissent. It's documented arbitrary arrests, unlawful detentions, enforced disappearances. Amnesty International says Rwandan journalists, human rights defenders, members of the opposition face a repressive environment. As the foreign minister, as the face of your government abroad, do such regular criticisms embarrass you, make you uncomfortable?
No, the criticism that Rwanda receives partly comes from misunderstanding where Rwanda is trying to go. Everybody knows Rwanda's history and the genocide and the recovery, but we've made some choices as a nation and as a country that are not typical, that fit our own desires that we have for our country. And so, for example, Rwanda has opted, and Rwandans, because this was a very consultative process, to go for not confrontational, but consensual politics. And so, you know, right there, when there is no confrontation and big fights in politics, then there is, you know, there are critics who think that there is repression and people cannot speak up, but those were really our choices from the beginning.
Locking people up without trial, arbitrary arrests, enforced disappearances, that's not consensus politics.
Well,
those are human rights abuses.
Well,
documented by human rights groups and by even friends of yours.
Look, if you pick any country,
yes,
not just Rwanda, you can pick human rights issues.
But we're talking about
everywhere.
Rwanda today because you're the foreign. I've interviewed foreign ministers from other countries.
Sure.
I'm asking about Rwanda, when human rights groups, you know, it's you know, the rankings aren't great. Reporters Without Borders ranks Rwanda 161 out of 180 countries when it comes to press freedom. It says in its most recent report that censorship is ubiquitous in Rwanda, and journalists who, quote, dare to criticize the government risk imprisonment or exile.
I've always wanted to know specifics about these cases. When you pick a country and say there are abuses of human rights, there is no freedom, there are no liberties, exactly what? Because it's important to go through these.
They mentioned the specifics, all the newspapers that are shut, journalists who are arrested, who have had to flee the country, the director of Christian Radio, the managing editor of the Russia newspaper, 2 women from the University of Rwanda radio station, arrested for broadcasting material deemed offensive to the president.
About some journalists being questioned and sent to jail for publishing what they felt was president. Well, she didn't agree or disagree. The only one she stood firm on was when he referred to the BBC, and she let him know exactly what they thought about that.
BBC Radio banned because it was accused of promoting genocide ideology. The BBC accused of promoting genocide ideology. Seriously?
Yes, absolutely. The BBC produced a documentary film, which is a total denial of the history of Rwanda, particularly the history of the genocide. So in Rwanda, that is not acceptable. In the UK, maybe that's a different story.
Look, the BBC can defend themselves. I think most people would question the BBC being genocide promoters.
Then, of course, he started to ask some questions regarding cases that had happened in Rwanda about a minister of intelligence who was exiled to South Africa and was found dead in his hotel room, and how the South African government sent 3 of the diplomats home. Again, she stood firm, not agreeing or disagreeing to what he was saying, but standing ground that we can't accuse our country of anything because there hasn't been any adjudication.
You've got the US government, you've even got your own fellow African government. South Africa expelled 3 Rwandan diplomats in 2014 after an attack on the home of an exiled Rwandan dissident, which came 3 months after the killing of the Rwandan former intelligence chief in Johannesburg, found strangled in his hotel room.
But you know that case has not been investigated. At least the results are not out. So I don't know.
But the South Africans think you were behind it. They kicked out 3 of your diplomats.
Well,
they didn't do that for no reason.
That would have to be adjudicated, and a court would have to decide on that. So
Fair
as long
enough.
as it's not decided, my government is not to be accused of anything.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that they're guilty of anything.
No,
I said
no.
the South Africans seem to think you were involved. That's all I'm saying. You would agree with that?
That's a way of justifying the question that you were posing.
No, it's a way of pointing out to you that you're on your own page. Everyone seems to not agree with you when it comes to these issues. Rwanda seems to be on its own.
Let me put it this way.
Yeah.
Rwanda, as any other country that I know of, has its own way of doing things, and not everybody should be agreeing with what the government of Rwanda is doing.
Should everyone agree when the Rwandan defense minister said in relation to that murdered former intelligence chief, when you choose to be a dog, you die like a dog? President Kagame himself said, whoever betrays the country will pay the price, will face negative consequences. That's not your government basically nudging and winking that they were behind those killings.
Let me again put it this way. I don't know anybody who betrays a country that gets rewarded. Let me just put it this way.
Okay, but when you say you choose to be a dog, you die like a dog, is that an appropriate thing to say? Some might say that sounds like a gang leader, not a national leader.
When somebody comes after my country and threatens the security of my country.
Well, he's from your country. With respect, he was a former intelligence chief of your president.
Absolutely. So whomever it is.
He's a Rwandan.
If you threaten my country.
Did he threaten your country?
Yes, he did. Absolutely.
Was he prosecuted?
Yes, he did.
What was he prosecuted for?
He absolutely did. No. We're talking about what he did.
I'm asking for what he was prosecuted
for. What he did is he allied himself with militias that were attacking Rwandans and throwing grenades in Rwanda.
Was he prosecuted for that? What was he prosecuted for?
Who was supposed to prosecute
Moments
him?
ago, you told me the Rwandan government can't be accused of anything because it's not been adjudicated in a court of law. What was this former intelligence chief found guilty of?
The government of Rwanda approached the government of South Africa to have this man extradited for trial.
Agreed,
that
but he wasn't tried.
That
so
never
according
happened.
to your criteria, if Rwanda is innocent of crimes because it's never been found guilty in a court of law, this man is also innocent of crimes.
But it's not.
I'm just using your logic.
It's not the government of Rwanda that refused to extradite him for trial.
But you agree he wasn't.
We didn't.
But you agree he was convicted of no crime.
We asked for him to be extradited.
But you agreed he was convicted of no crime. We agree on that. He was convicted of no crime.
How can he be convicted when he's not allowed to face trial, which is
and yet you're
what
celebrating
Rwanda
his death.
wanted?
Fair enough. And yet you're celebrating the death of a man who was convicted of nothing.
Why should I be unhappy about my enemies and people who threaten?
Well, we don't know who's threatened because he hasn't been tried, as you pointed out. A few years ago, your boss, President Kagame, told the Financial Times in an interview that I don't think anybody out there in the media, the UN, human rights organizations, has any moral right whatsoever to level any accusations against me or against Rwanda. Many would say that those are the words not just of authoritarian, that's quite megalomaniacal. I am above criticism. No one should criticize me.
What the president is saying is what he believes. President Kagame is a very accountable man, and everything he's done for Rwanda is out in the open. He's a man who's done extraordinary things for Rwanda. And he's also, if you know President Kagame, a man who doesn't hide or do things in the background. He's been totally accountable. Why?
He kept coming back with quick answers and throwing things at her. What about this? Well, your allies even don't agree, on and on, being aggressive and loud to try to intimidate her. But she stood her ground. She was cool, calm, and collective. And when he started asking about, was it right what President Kagame did about going to sign an agreement where he could stay into power, she calmly said, the Rwandans do things differently. This is something that the people wanted. And I felt this was powerful.
Why has he supported a constitutional amendment that was just passed, which effectively gives former presidents of Rwanda exemption from prosecution? Given the increasing level of criticism of your government, we've talked about some of the countries and groups that have criticized President Kagame, was it wise for him to support that constitutional amendment, which also allowed him to run now for a third 7-year term?
President Kagame has responded to what the people of Rwanda wanted, and there is nothing wrong with that. Why would he not? President Kagame has had time to reflect about what the people of Rwanda wanted. This is an exercise that went on for almost 2 years, eventually ended up in parliament, and came to his political party. His political party
supported it.
Supported it.
You support it.
Absolutely.
And yet,
Absolutely.
And yet it allows President Kagame to potentially stay in office until 2034, which would put him in office for a total of 34 years, more than a third of a century in a country that's a young democracy, a fragile democracy. Is that healthy for someone to be in power for a third of a century?
First of all, let's not anticipate what the future will be in Rwanda. Second, I don't see what's wrong with staying in office. I think what we need to be worried about is what people do while in office. You know, for me and for many Rwandans, democracy is not about coming and going. It's about exactly what you do when you're in office. And again, it's a decision of the people. If they want any leader out of the office, it's their prerogative.
Again, I think we have to realize as Westerners that although we may not agree with the way things are done in certain countries, it's not our place to speak on this. But this interview felt it was his power to do this. She actually started off the interview saying that the government of Rwanda decided to do a parliament of consensus, not conflict. And this is unheard of in most parliaments and most governments. So this speaks volumes to how Rwanda definitely does things differently. This interviewer was not happy with the way the interview was going, so he kept throwing other quotes and stats and things which would be effective if the minister was reacting. But she stayed calm. She wrote it out. She definitely stood her ground and said things that were very focused on her points, ensuring that the interviewer understood he wasn't winning this battle. So how am I going to use this in my class? Well, definitely going to say how the interviewer needs not to push his perspective on any interviewer, and definitely how some interviewees are hard to handle. This minister was prepared. She knew what she needed to say, and she was gracious. She was calm, cool, and collective, and respectful, but she didn't get swayed or deterred based on how the interviewer wanted the interview to go. She knew what her intention was, but she was also very professional. This can be tricky for many broadcasters, but I think this journalist was definitely beat in this particular interview. I'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas. I encourage you to listen to the entire interview. For your perspective, drop the thoughts in the comments below, and definitely please don't forget to hit that notification button and like and share. Until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.